Good evening and welcome to the Cover One Roundup. I am your host, David Fox. With me, as usual, is my co-host, UberHansen, and we are here live to talk about the final preseason game. But really, more than anything else, we are here to talk about the Cutdown day that is impending here. Coming up tomorrow at 4:30 is when the last of the cuts need to be made to make the 53-man roster. Obviously, there's a lot of shuffling and stuff that happens that, people who wait, quote unquote, wait in the parking lot and all that. But at the end of the day, folks, we are another step closer to regular season football. I am very excited about that. If you couldn't hear it in my voice right there, you can hear it now. I am so excited about this. It's a great time. I'm just very ecstatic. Uber, how are you?
Yeah, I've had enough preseason football. I think we all had enough preseason football, and I'm ready for real season football, and we need it now, not 2 weeks from now. Like, it's insane that we have to wait so long to get to it. But preseason football this year, I don't know if it felt like it to you. This felt really bad. Like, the games were just awful. There was so few like flash plays too, and I didn't just watch the Bills. The Bills games were terrible, but other games too. I'm like, what are we doing right now? This is bad.
It was a lot of nothingness that happened. I feel like in some preseasons there's been something, right? Like, whether it was Sammy Watkins getting those first like 5 catches before he got traded the next morning, or Kelvin Benjamin, like, oh, is Kelvin Benjamin going to be good with Nate Peterman at quarterback? And then it was like, oh, turns out both suck. And I was just thinking of something else. What? There was like, I don't know, whatever. Sometimes, oh yeah, the AJ McCarron comeback, right? Where like they came back from like multiple scores down in the fourth quarter to win a game in overtime, I think, or something like that. I could be making that up. But like, sometimes you just get something fun happening. And the other thing is like, it used to be at the Ravens. The Ravens had this super long preseason win streak that ended last year. Yeah. So they were like 1-2 or something in this preseason. It's like, once the streak is over, then can't really do it. Can't really muster that back up again, But still, usually there's something happening in the preseason, and then like honestly, this past week I was like, other than the Bills, I had no idea when other preseason games were played. I knew when preseason games were being played, but only because people were talking about them on Twitter, where it was like 3 Drake May tweets in a row. I'm like, why are we talking about Drake May right now? Is he playing? Oh, he is playing right now. Oh, I didn't know that. All right, whatever. It didn't make me watch it either. That's the thing. But whatever. Just not a great preseason.
Yeah, completely agree. And like, there wasn't. I don't even know who's the biggest story. It might be Joe Andreessen. Outside of him, though, like, I don't know of a big story in the NFL.
The biggest story is injuries. That's the problem. I think that's another reason why the preseason kind of sucked, is that like, we kind of wanted to see a little more of Curtis Samuel. And I think the Bills were wanting to play more of the starters throughout the preseason.
Yeah.
But the first game, just you didn't get a lot of the off.
Yeah, as David, I think, is frozen. So I think where David was going with this is that the Bills essentially didn't get to play their starters at all. That got alluded to in the third preseason game as well, that they were struggling to field players for that game, let alone even think about having their starters go into that game. Without them, that kind of took the wind out of the sails for what we expected, I think, as Bills fans. This preseason. But now, what, like David said, we're only about 10 days away from actual real football. I think that the Bills, regardless of their injuries, and maybe this is just the forever optimism in me, should be fine this season. And now I see David is back after a mini freeze.
Yeah, I don't know what happened there, but if it happens again, I'd say I'll let you know, but I can't really let you know without the internet. So anyway, it just the Pittsburgh game just sort of forced most of the offensive starters off because of the rain. So you didn't really see many people then. And then it's like, at that point, it's like, well, then why? We're not going to play them in the third game. Like, it just is. So I think they wanted to play them more in the preseason. It just ended up not happening, which was a shame. But at the end of the day, I'm just looking forward to seeing this team on the field with new coordinators, new offense, new people. Just it really feels like it's not a brand new team necessarily by any stretch, but there's a lot more new faces to this team than there have been in a while. And it almost feels like refreshing in a weird sense. It's just there's a certain like level of excitement for the start of the season that I haven't really had in a while. It's different. It's not necessarily better, right? Because like, it's like, what am I not going to be excited about Stephon Diggs and Mitch Morse being on this team, or Trey White coming back, or whatever, right? But it's just different, you know. There's something different that's happening. I'm looking forward to seeing something different happen, I guess.
Yeah, I think different's the perfect word too. Like, that's why I'm excited. It sucks at the same time. Like, I had a realization last week. I'm like, Trey White, Micah Hyde, and Jordan Poyer all came here in 2017. All three of them did. And this will be the first year not a single one of them is in a Bills jersey. And that's crazy how quickly time's gone, and that those three were here for that long, because in football terms, that's a very, very, very long time. And now this season, though, I feel like kind of excited, not necessarily because they're gone, but because it's going to be different. And I feel like we had reached a point where it had to become different. And now we get to see if different is good or different is bad, when it comes to the defense, at least.
For sure. All right. Let's get some comments. CT. Woohoo. Happy time is here. Happy time is almost here. Unless you're talking about our show, in which case, thank you for referring to us as Happy Time. Appreciate it. But if you're referring to regular season football, we do have just a little bit to go, but not that much longer. RJ says, I'm good with the week off to regroup for a grueling season ahead. That AJ McCarron game was the best preseason game of all time. You know, I kind of wonder, what is the best preseason game of all time? We may have to look into this. We may have to. I'm sure there's some sicko who's like written an article and watched a lot of preseason games to try and figure out, like, what is the most entertaining preseason game of all time, or best preseason game, or whatever. RJ also says, it felt like we wasted the first two preseason games. I wouldn't say the first game was a waste. I think it was just that it feels like a waste because they didn't want to play the starters beyond the first quarter, and so much of the first quarter got used by the Bears offense. And so we didn't really see much of the Bills offense. They went 3 and out. Like, the Bears went on a long drive. Bills went 3 and out. Bears went on another long drive. You know, it's just sort of like, it's unfortunate, but I wouldn't necessarily call that a waste, particularly. The second game was definitely a waste in terms of like trying to see starters, because they just couldn't do anything there. But we did get Joe Andreessen, which was something for that game. And it was something to watch, like, right off the bat, right? Because they went on defense first. You saw 44 get a pressure in it. I think, I mean, you and I think a couple other people were all like, is Tyler Matakavich on Pittsburgh? Who's 44? It was just kind of funny. Big Buffy baby, the snowman got him. This is me freezing.
That was a good comment. That's a good comment.
That's actually pretty funny. I'm not gonna lie. Might use that in the future. Pittsburgh Ralph Wilson Sr. from the grave saying, Pittsburgh weather screwed my viewing pleasure. Listen, our viewing pleasures are always screwed when not only Josh Allen can't play, but Mitch Trubisky has to play. That is an unpleasant viewing experience, unfortunately. Sweet Spike says, go Bills. Bradley from Twitter says, oh, hey, Hansel, so hot right now. I mean, I can't disagree. I can't disagree with that particular point. So, the first team offense had a drive and a half with all those new pieces. I just hope they'll come out slow this year. They can't afford it. Yeah. It's always interesting to like look at the schedule right now, because I would probably agree with that like, because of the division and the conference and all that, you can't really afford to have a slow start. And like historically speaking, under McDermott, the Bills have not had a slow start. At least I can't really think of one other than 2018, but that's just because the team was bad, right? Like, yeah. But yeah, 2019 they were 3-1 to start the year. In 2017 they were pretty solid to start the year. 2020, 2021, they had a slow start offensively, but they were able to kind of pick it up and, or at least get enough happening defensively where they were able to get enough wins. 2020, obviously they were hot, right? Like they started 4-0 and then went like 4-2 or whatever, but still, like they were 4-0 and they were like one of the major storylines of that season. 2022, they started off really well, and same in 2023 before injuries started happening, right? So
yeah,
it sucks, and I agree that when you look at the schedule as it stands right now, you sort of sit there and say like you gotta really not overlook Arizona to get to Miami on Thursday night, right? Because we've talked about Arizona, right, as a potential like spicy team, particularly offensively. I don't know what their defense is going to be like necessarily, but offensively that could be a really, really, really good team. Assuming Marvin Harrison Jr. isn't like deposed for some weird, don't know what's really happening there. Not really looking too deeply into that, but it is weird that, that's a weird situation. It's something for those who are unaware, because you don't really care about Arizona Cardinals football, and I don't blame you. But there's Marvin Harrison Jr. didn't join like the NFLPA or something like that. And so there's dispute on whether or not his merchandise can be sold by the team.
Yeah.
And now there's like lawsuits going against him and his dad for fraud. His dad being Hall of Famer Marvin Harrison Sr., who played for the Colts for many, many years with Peyton Manning.
As David freezes again.
You look at the schedule right now. It's tough. It's tough to win games in the NFL, but things can change. Am I about to lose connection again? I think I'm about to lose connection again.
No, you froze for a second. You're back now.
Connection again. If I haven't lost connection, I haven't. Okay, we're good. I'm gonna will this to victory. Will not be distant.
One quick comment on RJ's take, because I tend to agree to some extent. That being said, 2022, when the Bills open against the Rams, is the best opening game I've seen Josh out. I don't think people necessarily remember that game or recall that game in what it was. He was essentially flawless. He had 2 interceptions, but I know at least one of them went directly through somebody's hands. It might have been Gabe Davis, and the other one wasn't a bad interception either. And he had 5 incompletions. Like, he was phenomenal that game. He threw 3 passes in the preseason, 3 total. I think they had 1.5 drives that season too. So I think to some extent we use it as a crutch for Josh when he struggled against the Steelers and he struggled against the Jets. Like, oh, he didn't play enough in the preseason. Well, that's why he struggled so much in week 1. I think it's more just Josh getting sugar high in that first game of the season. Like, I'm going to go out and show them, and does something stupid like he did against the Jets, where that fumble to this day, I'll never forgive him for, where he just was being an idiot essentially. So I don't really think the Bills necessarily need to play in the preseason. I would have preferred more this preseason because of the new parts. But if the Bills come out and look terrible against the Cardinals, it's not because they didn't get time in the preseason. It's because something else went wrong. And if something else goes wrong, it's probably Josh just being a psychopath is what it is.
Yeah. Big Buffy baby. I keep looking at it and my mind keeps going to Big Fluffy baby. Big Buffy baby is actually better. I have confidence we have enough talent on the roster to be competitive late season, but my concern is the chemistry early on. Aside from Arizona, there's big competition early and often. That's fair. It's between Miami and Jacksonville, and who's week 3? Week 3 is my Baltimore.
No,
that seems wrong.
It's Baltimore, Jets, and Houston are all bundled together.
Oh, geez. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So Arizona, Miami, Jaguars, Baltimore, Houston, Jets. Yeah. It's a tough schedule. It just is. So a tough division with a first place schedule and a tough conference on top of that. It's hard. I would also argue that even in last year's opener against the Jets, Josh Allen threw 4 interceptions, right? And they still went into overtime and almost won the game. Almost won the game sounds different than what actually happened, which was that they went 3 and out and had to punt. And then, Travis Gibson had a great return and everyone got very excited before Jets fans realized their season was over before it really had a chance to start. But regardless, right? Like they were still in that game despite all of the mistakes that they made. So maybe there's not quite the same margin of error with this team this year with how it's constructed versus last year. But I don't know how true that is. And I don't know how true that is or isn't until we actually go and get to see these games and see what happens. So we will see. Before we get too deep into this, we kind of went right into comments and then we got a lot of comments. So thank you for that. First of all, appreciate all of you turning up and interacting with us. We really love this part of it. We do need to talk about one thing, and that is some of you fine and lovely folks who are you ready? Are you ready for this?
I'm ready.
Okay. Who are our One Pass subscribers. So for those who are One Pass subscribers, thank you so much for being One Pass subscribers. If you are not a One Pass subscriber, right now is like the time to do it. It is just before the season starts. It is $60 a year. It's the best Buffalo Bills content you will get, period. It is a great community that you get to interact with on Discord about the Bills, about life, about politics if you hate yourself that much, about food, about music, about TV. There's whatever you want to talk about. There's a whole bunch of people in here. They all want to talk about something with you as well. So all of that plus exclusive content like Greg Thompson's salary cap breakdown, which will help you make sense of something that is so unbelievably stupidly complicated. Like, it's all here. It's all for you. It's all made for you. It is the best money you can spend for football content outside of probably like NFL Sunday Ticket, straight up, right? Like just being able to access every game at any given point in time. This is probably the best thing, and it's arguably more efficient, a more bang for your buck kind of thing, because not everyone is going to watch like an NFC South matchup in Week 15, right? Like nobody's. I don't know how many of you with NFL Sunday Ticket are going to be really interested in watching Panthers Saints in Week 15 or whatever that is. Yeah, so. Sign up today. It is the best $60 you'll spend on football, guaranteed. It is so worth it. You get a great community of people to share football with and interact with. It's a great time. Sign up today. It's totally worth it. All right, we're back. We're back. All right. Yeah, it's really great. It's really a great just a great thing to have. And as RJ, who is on there, brings up we've had some great video game chats there too in Discord. Just true. I remember talking about what is it? Oh, Ghost of Tsushima, which I'm still playing. Which is, first of all, great game. Also, a lot bigger than I thought it was. I think I can look this up right now. I think I'm like 53 hours into that right now. And I still have like probably another 20 or so hours to go. I think it's a much bigger game than I thought it was, which is nice. Yeah. Let's see. Yeah, Sweet Spike also says One Pass is awesome, and you get a sticker and a shirt. Great, exactly. You get a sticker and a shirt. Who doesn't love free swag? Sweet Spike also says Sunday Ticket was a scam. I'm out of market. I was only able to watch 2 games on 479. Sunday Ticket Red Zone plan because all the games were on different streaming services. It's a lot of issues with that particular aspect of things. That is for sure, unfortunately. But anyways, we're gonna move on to we're gonna briefly talk about the actual game that happened on Saturday. It's not a ton to talk about, so we'll kind of keep that brief, but we'll spend the majority of our time talking about what we think is going to come from this, what is going to be expected out of this 53-man roster. So let's just dive into this Panthers game. So I found it interesting that the Panthers played their starters, considering they didn't play their starters in the first 2 preseason games. I kind of just assumed that they were going to sit out the 3rd preseason game as well. It seemed I kind of got those sort of vibes from Dave Canales, but apparently he was like, we'll just play our starters. And in fairness, they looked decent, pretty good, right? I mean, they scored a touchdown, but the Bills didn't play their starters and still made some pretty good plays, right? Which I don't know if that says more about the Bills backups than it does the Panthers starters. Maybe it's a bit of both, but it was interesting just sort of seeing that whole first couple of drives develop on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, I thought that the Bills actually played decently, considering they were literally playing all their backups to the Panthers starters. And I think that also goes to some discussion, with people comparing Anthony Brown and Ben DiNucci. Like, Ben DiNucci was literally playing starters of an NFL team. Anthony Brown was playing 3rd and 4th stringers. So when analyzing those two, I think that part has to come into conversation. In fact, the Bills have already cut Anthony Brown, which I think was expected. So Ben DiNucci seems to be, at least for the time being, the Bills' practice squad quarterback, maybe even their QB2, while Mitch Trubisky heals up. But I don't know. The Bills players, a lot of them knew they were competing for a job. Some showed up and some did not show up, which I guess was one interesting part of this game, let's say.
Yeah, it's there were definitely some players. I mean, it was one of the things I wanted to watch during this game was Tyrell Shavers, right? Because that he's kind of been the guy who's been penciled in as the wide receiver 5 of this team, because he's had a good training camp. 2nd year in a row he's had a good training camp. It's also 2nd year in a row where he's had a pretty up and down preseason, and he got a couple catches on that first drive that made him that looked good, and I was like, all right, now we're getting somewhere. And he absolutely cooked this dude on a double move. Absolutely cooked him, and just couldn't quite bring that pass in. Could it have been a better pass? Maybe. Part of me wonders if because you could see him like kind of let up a step during that when the ball is in the air. Maybe he was thinking he was moving too fast and didn't want to run out of space in the back of the end zone. But yeah, it was just disappointing because he was right there. He went and really tried to make it, but he just couldn't actually bring it in. It was just really disappointing that he couldn't cap that off with a great catch. Regardless, though, I mean, I feel like we're on the same page. Tyrell Shavers is probably wide receiver 5 for this team. Yeah.
We're taking like MVS. Like, I'd take MVS out of the conversation because it sounds like he's going to be hurt. But I think just because of the special teams, like, I think it's between him and KJ Hamler. But Hamler is more a return guy, and I think that they have other guys that can return, Daquan Hardy, Ty Johnson, etc. And I don't know if Hamler does enough on return to earn him that job. So even if they're in a tie per se, like let's say they're like, oh, Hamler and Tyrell Shavers as wide receivers, they're equivalent, which I probably like Hamler better as a wide receiver than I do Tyrell Shavers, because I've at least seen something from Hamler. But Shavers special teams, I think, gives him the nod. It's going to be tight between those two. I don't know what the Bills are going to do. I would lean Shavers if I was the Bills, though.
I think Shavers, like you said, has done enough on special teams to make you feel good about that aspect of it. And especially when you consider the fact that they're going to be playing a lot of 2 tight ends and probably 2 running backs as well. I'm not super concerned about who wide receiver 5 is going to be, because I do have enough faith in those first 4 receivers, right? Like Keon Coleman and Curtis Samuel and Khalil Shakir and someone else whose name
he doesn't wear shoes.
Oh yeah, Matt Collins. That's right. Another special teams guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I have enough faith in those guys where I'm like, okay, it'll be fine. But I would prefer someone who has more experience. I mean, KJ Hamler does have experience in the NFL, but it's also not a lot. It's not like he's done a whole lot in the NFL. I don't know. It's not a great situation. We knew it wasn't going to be a great situation for the Bills, at least depth wise. So it's tough, but this is what they're going to have to roll with. And the surplus that they have at tight end and running back makes me feel overall fine in terms of like offsetting that deficiency at wide receiver. So,
yeah. And I expect Brandon being like, there's going to be 1,000 players that are waived, cut, whatever terminology we use, depending on their current status in the next 24 hours, right? I think tomorrow's cutdown day. So 1,000 players, there's going to be wide receivers. I wouldn't put it past Brandon Beane to identify a guy and say, yeah, we'll put a claim in for him. He'll be that guy. He'll take the spot of a Shavers or a KJ Hamler because we see the talent upside there, whatever. But at the end of the day, to your point with the tight end and running back room, I don't really think it matters all that much. And the funny thing is we're going to talk a lot on this show, and Twitter's been talking a lot about this in general. Like, we're talking about like the bottom 5 players on the roster who are game day inactive players or special teams players, essentially. It matters still because you need those players on your team, but it isn't going to determine necessarily the success and failure of teams come 2024.
right. That's the thing, is like, people kind of look at some of these competitions, and I think they maybe forget how good this roster actually is.
Yeah.
And maybe that's also because of how much older talent left, whether that's Trey White or the 2 safeties in Poyer and Hyde, Mitch Morse, obviously Stephon Diggs. Obviously, that's a lot of talent to go out the door, and Gabe Davis as well. But there's still plenty of good players on this roster, not the least of which is your quarterback, who is the second best quarterback in the NFL and would easily be the best quarterback in the NFL if the best quarterback of all time also didn't happen to exist at the same time, which is unfortunate and still makes me mad. But this is a good roster. Some of these competitions are interesting, and we'll talk about one of these, which is going to be running back. Before we do that, Big Buffy Baby getting married this weekend, going to the Bills home opener for the honeymoon. If that's not a Bills fan dedicated, I don't know what is. Congratulations to Big Buffy Baby.
Big
Hope for a wonderful marriage and a very good day. A very good day for your wedding as well, I think, though. I hope for nothing but happiness for both of you. Music Blogger 87. Do you think Frank Gore Jr. will make the 53? No, but he sure made a strong case for it. Yeah. I'll say that. Man, lock that. If there was one thing that was actually exciting from this preseason for the Bills, it was Frank Gore Jr., particularly in that last game. Right? That was just he looked like an NFL running back, right? And I think we kind of mentioned this with Joe Andreessen as well last week with the Steelers game, in that, what the very least that you need to be able to do as an undrafted guy or as a late round pick in these preseason games, you need to show that you actually belong at this stage. Mm-hmm. You can't look out of place or out of sync or like you're just completely overwhelmed by the talent that's around you. And I think both Joe Andreessen and Frank Gore Jr. have at the very least shown they will have some sort of NFL career. Yeah. Who knows how long that'll be? Who knows to what degree of success they'll have? But at the very least, they showed they can be NFL caliber players. And Frank Gore Jr. in particular just showed he just looked like a very natural, very smooth runner who knew how to hit certain lanes and knew when to bounce outside. It was a really impressive showing from Frank Gore Jr. in particular.
Yeah, and your point I think is important that both Andreessen and Frank Gore essentially did what they needed to do this preseason, which wasn't necessarily make the Bills roster, and they still both might, or one might, or both might not, but they did enough where they're going to continue their NFL career. That might be on the Bills 53, that might be on the Bills practice squad, or that might be somewhere else on their 53 or practice squad. Both have done enough to me where I say, yeah, they're NFL players. I don't know to what level of success that means. Like, I don't expect Frank Gore Jr. to rush for 1,500 yards in a single season in his career, but I think he could be a serviceable running back. I don't expect Joe Andreessen to be the next Luke Kuechly, even though I've seen some tweets suggest he might be, which is just, I'm excited about him too, but that's a bit much. So I think it's really exciting to watch those guys basically take preseason, which is a nationally viewed audition, and run away with it and do incredible things with it. And for Frank Gore Jr. in particular, I did find myself during that game saying, like, he looks pretty damn good. I don't think he's better than James Cook. I don't think he's better than Ray Davis. Might he be better than Ty Johnson? He very well might be. So it starts to get me to think, like, could the Bills be leaning on this idea of, like, maybe we keep him and let Ty Johnson go, who was fun last year? But I also, to an extent, think you could probably let Ty Johnson go and put him on the practice squad. So I don't know what the Bills are going to do. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that Frank Gore Jr. will make the team, but I right now would give Ty Johnson the nod over Frank Gore, just because this coaching staff seems to like what Ty Johnson brings.
Yeah, and I like what Ty Johnson does, right? I mean, his sort of production that he had from the second half of the season on was pretty impressive for what essentially amounted for running back 3 opportunities. And he made the most out of those opportunities. And I'd like to see more of it, particularly when he can actually be a true running back 3, not like a running back 3 kind of sort of playing running back 2 because Latavius Murray can't. But, you know, because you have James Cook and you have Ray Davis, you have a clear pecking order there. And whoever this third guy is, whether that's Ty Johnson, whether that's Frank Gore Jr., whether that's Darrynton Evans, who also had a really good game and has had 2 really good preseasons in a row, and also has some regular season action when he played for the Bears this past year. I mean, here's the thing. We can all kind of quibble about who can or who should make this roster in terms of running backs. At the end of the day, I don't know if they can make a wrong decision.
Yes.
It's kind of one of those where it's not like they're comparing like a veteran in Ty Johnson who's not good, but they just sort of like and trust him, versus a young guy that they don't that has played well in the preseason, but they're not willing to like give the horse. She's like, no, Ty Johnson has been good with this team, and we saw that. It's not like spectacular necessarily, but he did what they needed him to do and a little bit more. Darrynton Evans has some talent, some interesting ability. Frank Gore Jr., I think, has a future in this league as, at the very least, a committee type of running back. I don't think you can make a wrong decision here. The wrong decision, really almost the impossibly dumb, bad decision, would be to have none of these guys on your roster, which I don't think is going to happen, right? No. Like, I don't think that's what's going to happen here.
Yeah, I'm also intrigued too, like, you know, this time of year, we're all focused on who's going to make the 53-man roster. The subsequent conversation is who are they going to be able to get onto the 16, maybe for them 17-man practice squad. But then there's a whole nother conversation that needs to be had during the season, which is who are your 5 game day inactives. And I do think that this position in particular, RB3, for a large extent could be an active. I know that somebody brought up Ty Johnson will probably return kicks. I think that's a possibility, but I don't know if they need to activate him to do that. And I think that they could lean on James Cook and Ray Davis, and God forbid an injury happens in that game to both, in a single game to both of them, you could move to Curtis Samuel, or you could just go Josh Allen back in shotgun with Dawson Knox or Reggie Gilliam next to him if you had to in an emergency. I think that whoever this RB3 is very well could be inactive, which goes to my earlier point of like, how much does it really matter? It does, because it's an important, you know, reserve player to have. And I think that they have really good options, and they probably are going to pick Ty Johnson. But if they don't, I don't think I'm going to be upset. And if they do, I'm not going to be upset. And I think you're going to see the panic like Bills fans had with Raheem Blackshear. Remember him?
Yes.
And everyone's like, how could we let Raheem Blackshear go? And he has a total of 123 rushing yards in his career since the Bills let him go. Which
that's 100 more than I would have guessed.
Great, but also great for Raheem Blackshear. Like go enjoy your career. He just didn't really fit the Bills at the time, and that might be the path that Frank Gore goes down. I probably lean that's the path he's going to go down. He'll end up on a team like Carolina, doing just what he did. Blackshear.
Well, and RJ also brings up a good point, which is that they might try to get him on the practice squad because Ty Johnson hasn't really played much because he's been dealing with an injury, and if he is still not necessarily totally available, now you come to a bit of a tougher decision of like, Darrynton Evans has already been somebody who's been claimed by other teams before and has been on other teams. So that's a player who has some sort of reputation around the league as somebody that's like, hey, this guy could be available and he could actually contribute to us at some point in the regular season. Whereas with Frank Gore Jr., you're kind of, not entirely, but kind of going off of one game. A good game, mind you, and maybe a good game plus some, legacy a little bit, right? Being Frank Gore's son. And maybe Miami is looking at that like, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we had Frank Gore Jr.? Because Frank Gore Sr. went to the University of Miami and it was a big hurricane and I think still lives in South Florida, if I remember correctly. I could be wrong, though. But regardless, right? Like, I think they will do their best to keep one or the other on the roster, and we'll see how they handle Ty Johnson and what's going on with him right now. So it's up in the air. At the end of the day, a running back that I feel relatively confident in will be on this roster as the third running back.
Yeah.
Which is fine. Totally fine. So that's wide receiver. We talked about running backs. Do we want to talk about like tight end 3 and what might be happening there? Because with Quentin Morris being out for sure for a couple of weeks, again, you've got your 2 established guys in Knox and Kincaid, but like we've said many times, if you're going to be running a lot of 12 personnel, you need 3 tight ends, because if one of those guys goes down, you need someone else who can come in and do one of those roles. Quentin Morris has been that guy in the past couple of years, but now he's hurt. We don't know exactly when he's supposed to be coming back. If he doesn't come back sometime before the first week or 2 of the season, you've got Zach Davidson, who had a nifty little one-handed catch late in the game. You also had Trey McKitty, who seems to be a bit of a better blocker, even if he's not the same pass catcher as the Zach Davidson. It almost feels like we're talking about like diet Dalton Kincaid and diet Dawson Knox right now. That being said, Trey McKitty's 2-point conversion catch was very exciting.
That was fun. This all comes down to Quentin Morris's injury, right? If Morris is somehow good to go week 1, he's making the 53-man. I'd be very surprised if he didn't, and Zach Davidson did. If Quentin Morris can't go, then the discussion shifts to what the Bills do with him. Are they going to stick him on IR? Are they going to try to cut him with an injury settlement? And then that opens the path for Zach Davidson. I don't really think Trey McKitty has a legitimate path, although that catch was really fun. I don't think he has a legitimate path to the 53. I don't know. I'm a little bit concerned with the number of players that the Bills could theoretically put on injured reserve, because you only are allowed to bring a certain number back throughout the year. And I was just trying to pull up the exact numbers. I think you get up to 8 during the regular season and 10 if you make the postseason that can return from injured reserve. So if we factor in just a couple names here, Matt Milano, they want to bring him back. That's one of those players. Let's say Mitch Trubisky ends up on IR and they're like, well, we got to bring him back at some point. That's your second. Maybe MVS, maybe a couple other players. And then what happens throughout the season, like you start to eat up those bringing a player back. And that's a little bit concerning to me. That's the only reason I'd caution Quentin Morris going to IR, because I don't think it would be worth bringing him back and using one of those pieces for him. So in the meantime, though, if Quentin Morris can't go week 1, I think it might be Zach Davidson makes this 53-man roster, which stuns me because I didn't expect to say that actually coming into the show even.
For sure. And yeah, it's very possible where they say no and maybe they value blocking ability a little bit more and it's Trey McKitty, but
yeah, true.
I don't know. This is one of those where, like, wide receiver 5, I have a pretty solid idea of where they'll probably end up doing there. Same with running back, where it's like there's a decision to be made here and it's a tough decision, but they'll have a guy that we feel confident in. Whereas with tight end, it just sort of feels like I don't really know what their plan is here. I don't know what the lean is here, whether it's more towards somebody who can catch like Davidson or somebody who could block like McKitty. I really don't know what they're going to end up doing there. I don't know what they'll do with Quentin Morris if he's gone for an extended period of time. If they put him on short-term IR, if they put him on the PUP list, I don't know. Like there's a lot of different things that can happen there. So that is probably one of the bigger mysteries leading up to Cutdown Day, at least in my mind.
Yeah.
Just the Tippecanoe says, what it do indeed. Tippecanoe, always appreciate you being here. That's going to be one of the ones I probably try to monitor the most, is just seeing what they end up doing there. And seeing really more than anything else, how long that quote unquote decision actually sticks.
Yeah.
Maybe they get news that Quentin Morris can be healthy by week 2 or whatever. And maybe that affects their decision. I don't know. It's hard to say what they're leaning towards right now.
Yeah. And this is the tight end 3 role for the Bills, I think, is uniquely beneficial to Buffalo because of their 2 tight end sets and because Dawson Knox has a fairly extensive injury history at this point in his career. So this person probably going to have to play at some point. And I'm not exactly ecstatic with I think Quentin Morris is a fine tight end 3. I think Zach Davidson shows some promise, but you can obviously upgrade this role where, we talked about the RB3 for the Bills. I'm pretty confident in Ty Johnson, Frank Gore, and Darrynton Evans. I'm not as confident in this role for Buffalo. And the hope is that it never really matters. It doesn't need to come to fruition. But if it does, you need a guy that has, NFL capabilities. And also, just to go full circle there, as I start saying this, like Quentin Morris played, I think, like 85% of the special team snaps last year. That is not a nothing thing either. Like True. That is very, very meaningful. Yeah. And I think he can do it. I don't know if Zach Davidson can. His body shape doesn't really fit what they asked Morris to do, for instance.
And that's fair. And maybe that's where they're leaning, right? Is that if we keep Zach Davidson because he has the ability to catch the ball, how many times are we throwing to Zach Davidson?
Yeah.
Right? Like,
yeah.
Are we really going to scheme up a Zach Davidson play? Are we going to, like, over a Ray Davis, James Cook, Dalton Kincaid, or Dawson Knox, Curtis Samuel, Keon Coleman? Like, if that's the case, I would much rather lean more towards McKitty, because what he can do is probably going to matter more than what Zach Davidson could do for this team specifically.
Yeah. And like in the red zone, I would be livid if they took Dawson Knox or Dalton Kincaid off the field for Zach Davidson. Like, I'd be like, what the hell are you doing? You have Dawson Knox has proven, if anything, he's good in the red zone. And Dalton Kincaid is probably going to be their number 1 pass catcher. You're not taking them off the field for Zach Davidson. So then to some point, what's the point of Zach Davidson? Like, what's the benefit here? And now I've kind of talked myself out of Zach Davidson, or you've talked me out of Zach Davidson, to where I'm like, is Trey McKitty the guy? Is he the one that's going to make this roster? This position is very, very odd to kind of look at and project what the Bills are going to do.
Yeah. we will see what happens tomorrow because as we discussed before the show, nothing's going to happen while we're actually on the air.
No.
Everything will happen after this show is done. Maybe even directly after this show is done. Who's to say?
Second we turn it off. Yeah.
But nothing newsworthy actually happens on our show, which is supposed to be about the news surrounding the Bills more than anything else. So it's just the typical news also says Reggie Gilliam, the NFL's biggest secret. He will rush and catch 1,000 yards and 32 touchdowns. From your lips to God's ears, right? I mean,
I hope
I'm all for it. I'm not going to say no to that. Let's move on to the offensive line. So starting five is set. You've got Dawkins at left tackle, Edwards at left guard, McGovern at center, Torrance at right guard, and Spencer Brown at right tackle. I feel confident enough, even if I don't feel amazing, but confident enough in that group to where that's the starting five, and that's fine.
Yep.
You also have Ryan Van DeMark, who's been on this team. This is the second year, I believe, with the team, and has had some regular season action as well. Was the left tackle on a go-ahead touchdown drive to win the season, essentially, for the Buffalo Bills, which was impressive that he just came in for Dawkins during that drive, and everything just proceeded. There was no like, oh, what happened there? Oh, Ryan Van DeMark is in. What a terrible thing. Like what? It's just like, oh no, everything went as planned, and that's what you like. So Ryan Van DeMark as a backup. Cedric Van Pran Granger feels like a pretty solid, safe bet as the backup center, or at least somebody on this team. Richard Garage probably as another backup tackle. Lael Collins as one of the backup interior offensive linemen who has swing guard tackle capability. You also have, oh my God, the name went into my mind and then immediately left. Alec Anderson. Thank you. Thank you for reading my mind, even when I can't. So, yeah, Alec Anderson, who also has some kind of guard tackle flexibility, but really is mostly a guard at this point. So those to me kind of seem like the main names. I feel like if one of the guys that I wouldn't feel 100% confident on is maybe Richard Garage, which is not necessarily an indictment on Garage so much as it is that Tylen Grable has actually been pretty good this preseason. So I don't know what your thoughts are on this offensive line, particularly when it comes to the backups or the starters. You can talk about whoever you want. This is your show too.
Yeah, I mean the starters. I think we're all in agreement, or at least you and I are, that the five are set, and that's who it's going to be, at least for the foreseeable future. And Ryan Van DeMark pretty much locked in. Cedric Van Pran Granger pretty much locked in. So that sets you at 7. I probably expect them to carry 10. I don't expect them to carry 9, so I expect them to carry 10. And then all the names you mentioned are kind of where my mind goes to, where I'm a little bit like, I don't know. Like Richard Garage seems like he could be a legitimate NFL player, but Tylen Grable is this raw prospect that the Bills could mold into a future right tackle if they can't re-sign Spencer Brown, for instance. And I don't think that they can, like, if they cut Grable, who they just drafted this year, he will get claimed. I'm pretty confident that somebody will claim him, so he wouldn't be on the Bills. If they cut Richard Garage, who they had as an undrafted free agent last year, they did cut him, brought him to the practice squad. I'm pretty sure they could sneak him onto the practice squad, but I don't think the Bills maybe are really even thinking about that. They might be thinking more like, this is the better player, put him in, and maybe that's Garage. I also would throw out there, like, Lyle Collins is so interesting to me. I had him as basically a lock going into this preseason, and then he really hasn't played much, and he's only played guard. I thought they might try to flex him a little bit at tackle to see if he had something left, because he used to play tackle at one point in his career, and they didn't. And so if Lyle Collins is only a guard and Alec Anderson can play guard and center and tackle, so Alec Anderson's your Ryan Bates, and Van Pran Granger, they've been playing at guard and center, and Tylen Grable is a tackle, and Garage is also tackle with some guard flex. Like, does Lyle Collins not fit? So I'm kind of all over the place after the first 7 offensive linemen. And I guess I probably put Alec Anderson in there too. So 8. And then I'm looking at a spot between Lyle Collins, Tylen Grable, Richard Garage. I don't really see anyone else on this roster. Will Clapp. I don't see Will Clapp. Like, why carry a center when you have Van Pran Granger? Like, so it's between those 3 other guys for 2 spots. And I don't know who they're going to be.
Yeah, and with someone like Collins, I mean, you bring up the lack of play at tackle in particular, right? And that is fair, because he has played tackle before, and I'm kind of wondering if maybe the injuries that he's had and age have kind of caught up to him, where maybe he doesn't have the same foot speed that he used to have to play in space like that, and maybe he's just a guard only guy. I'm not 100% sure. Maybe they didn't play him at tackle because they wanted to see other guys play at tackle throughout the preseason. And they basically said, we know Lyle Collins can play a tackle. We're not going to spend time confirming that because they have, all this time in practice to see that as well. So I don't know 100% what the thought process is there. I still feel pretty confident in saying that Lyle Collins will be on this team as a backup, along with Ryan Van DeMark and Cedric Van Peren Granger. I think those 3 I feel the most confident in. It's a battle between Richard Garage and Tylen Grable as another backup tackle. It's, I feel relatively confident in Alec Anderson. It seems pretty solidly set that he's going to be another one of these backup linemen. Again, the tackle situation between Grable and Garage seems to be the biggest competition right now. And that'll be interesting. Again, this is sort of a situation where I feel pretty confident in either one, relatively speaking, right? I mean, Garage was a big story last year, and he performed well last year. It hasn't necessarily been the same spotlight on him, relatively speaking. There's only so much spotlight you're getting as a backup tackle during the preseason. But I think that this is another situation where whoever they decide to go with, whoever they feel more confident in, is probably who I will feel confident in, because that's the type of confidence that I have in Aaron Kromer. In particular. True. Right? Like, whoever he decides this is who I need to keep is probably the right choice.
This is all. We're also in Brandon Beane mess arounds and finds out season, where he just finds a offensive lineman to trade for some day 3 pick. And if I'm looking at these names, like Lyle Collins is the one that makes Lyle Collins seems like the name recognition could get Brandon Beane a pick or 2. I don't think he's going to get a pick for Garage. He's not going to trade Grable. Maybe Alec Anderson. I don't know. Like, Lyle Collins, maybe that's the Brandon Beane's going to make a trade. I'm pretty damn sure that we're going to get a trade announcement, and it's going to happen whenever we turn off this show. It'll get announced that he traded somebody. But this is what Brandon Beane does: is he finds bottom of the roster players that he's going to have to cut because they don't fit on this team, and he trades them for a day 3 pick that he can use to move up in the next draft.
Will Clapp to the Chargers or something like that. I don't know. Something like that, right? Sweet Spike says, in Kroger we trust. So are you? So I understand that you were trying to say in Kromer we trust, and to which I agree. You said autocorrect hates me. I understand that. Believe me, I get that feeling. I'm with you. But also, did it autocorrect to Kroger because you are a Midwesterner? Because I for those who don't know, I went to school. I went to college in Illinois, so I spent 4 years in the Midwest, about an hour south of Chicago. A lot of Kroger trips were made during that time. Wouldn't necessarily say I miss Kroger, but there's something special to Kroger. There we go. The answer is yes, of course. I know what we're about. I know what I'm about. I know my regional grocery stores. Sort of, kind of. Moving on. So I feel pretty confident that whatever they decide to do at the offensive line with that particular tackle position, right? Whatever they do there, it'll probably work out for them. So, any other thoughts on the offense before we move on to the defense?
No, I think we hit it. I think a lot of it's super chalky, right? We named essentially 3 spots that are up in the air, which, to be fair, is more than in seasons past. Like in seasons past, you could get pretty damn close to the 53 writing it down. Here, I don't know if I can get those last 3 names. And we also went this entire time without talking about Justin Shorter, and I don't know how the Justin Shorter hive is going to survive when he is inevitably cut, because he will be cut.
Yeah, I feel confident in saying he's not making this roster.
Yeah. No, he just
hasn't done much. All right. So moving on to the defense. Defensive line. This also feels like a weirdly chalky group, which I probably wouldn't have said coming into training camp. But then you just sort of see how this rotation is, and it's like, oh no, yeah, this makes sense. Assuming Von Miller returns to some sort of form where he's not just a waste of a roster spot like he was last year. And you still have Greg Rousseau, you've got Ed Oliver, you bring back Daquan Jones, you bring in Austin Johnson, you have AJ Epinesa, who you re-signed. You've got, am I forgetting someone? I feel like I'm forgetting something. Smoot. Yeah. Dwayne Smoot, who, feels pretty good about, I feel pretty good about that. And Deshaun Williams. I mean, that to me seems like the defensive line that will be set.
You didn't mention Dwayne Carter.
And Dwayne Carter. That's who I always forget. And I don't know why I keep forgetting about
Dwayne Carter. Solomon.
I love Dwayne Carter. I love you, Dwayne Carter. I don't forget about you just because I don't like you. I love you. But I don't know. It's not a name that comes into my mind a whole lot, apparently. But that seems like that'll be the defensive line to some degree or another.
Yeah, I do wonder Kingsley Jonathan. Like, I don't think he's going to make the roster, because if you have Rousseau, Epinesa, Solomon, Miller, and Smoot as your edge guys, do you need 6 defensive ends? And Smoot has some flex where he can go inside, which is fine. I just don't see how Jonathan cracks the roster. I think the Bills try to get him on their practice squad as a really, really good option as a 6th defensive end. But Javon Solomon and DeJuan Smoot just seem like better choices right now in their career to fill out those final 2 spots at the end.
Yeah, there's a lot of talent on this defensive line.
Mm-hmm.
My only concerns would be the age of Daquan Jones and Von Miller at this point.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of positive reports coming out about Von Miller when he was at training camp, saying that he looked good, he looked fresh, he looked like he was doing stuff that he was not able to do last season coming back from his ACL injury. He said that, somewhat predictably, I probably shouldn't have played last year. Like, who would have thought? You can't just manifest your destiny like that. Him and Aaron Rodgers, right?
Jeez.
But the other thing with Daquan Jones, right? I mean, he's good when he's on the field, but he's had injuries on when he's been with this team. And he is 33, right? Something like that. And while I think that position can age relatively well if you play with good technique, at a certain point, it does catch up with you. And we saw that with Linval Joseph, who they brought in to try and replace some of Daquan Jones' production, and it just didn't work. And in fairness, they did bring in Austin Johnson, who I like and is a little bit younger than Daquan Jones, and that makes me feel good about, not just Daquan Jones if he goes down, but also just like having him as part of the rotation to where if you take Daquan Jones out, or when you take Daquan Jones out, there won't be this gap, like this big gap between those two in particular.
Yeah, they didn't have anybody to fill Daquan Jones' shoes last year when he went out. And, whether that they tried with Tim Settle, they tried with Jordan Phillips, all those were just tries. They didn't work. If Daquan went down this year, I'd be much more confident in Austin Johnson than I was with the Bills' options last year. And that being said, the Bills, despite that injury to Daquan Jones, still played relatively well because the rest of the defensive line and their linebackers were able to kind of pick up that defense. But this season, they have better depth there. And because they do this heavy rotation, Austin Johnson's going to see the field and Dwayne Carter's going to see the field. And I like those two behind Ed Oliver and Daquan Jones a lot. And I think the Bills 4 deep at defensive tackle is good, especially considering Daquan Jones' age.
Yeah, and that makes me feel a little bit more confident than probably I did last year, where it kind of felt like at defensive tackle in particular, it was still a little too reliant on, hey, they can bring in Ilianku, who looks good in the preseason and has been okay at times, but it's just like, I don't really want this guy to be a regular rotational defensive tackle. That doesn't make me feel confident. Whereas Austin Johnson and Dwayne Carter and Deshaun Williams, feel more confident in that. Sean Williams has been a rotational guy and a really solid rotational guy his entire career. Dwayne Carter is a rookie who has sort of inside-out flexibility. Austin Johnson has been doing this for years and has been a very solid player. I feel very good about this rotation as it stands right now. And hopefully they continue to stay healthy. Yeah. And more than anything else, I mean, maybe not more than anything else, I really want Greg Rousseau to stay healthy. Because I think that he really has that potential to have that genuine breakout season.
Yeah, and we talked about it last week. And despite it being preseason, the things he did to the Steelers in just a couple drives, when you're that dominant that it shines in preseason game against another team's starters, even though there's questions about the Steelers right tackle, it's meaningful. And we talked about how you can kind of see Greg Rousseau looks a little bit bigger and a little more built this year. I feel like he's on the precipice of a monster season if he stays healthy. That's all that's stopping him, I think, is that he just needs to stay healthy. And it's funny because when you talk about the AFC East and you look at the Dolphins, there's a similar sentiment with Jalen Phillips, who has shown flashes and promise of being a great pass rusher, but now he's hurt. And the questions are, can he stay healthy? So you're seeing this kind of in parallel, both the Dolphins and Bills be like, we have these really good players that we're really, really excited about, but if they can't stay healthy, we're never going to see it come to fruition. I really, really hope that this is the year Rousseau stays healthy. The only problem for the Bills, if he does, is they're going to have to pay him a lot of money to keep him if he balls out this year.
100%. It's this is the cycle that you have to deal with. Yeah. If you draft good players, you're gonna have to pay them, and if you don't, then you have to hit on another good player in the draft again. It's tough. This is the nature of the game. It's the nature of the salary cap. It's the nature of the rookie contract structure. It is what it is. You gotta be able to make a decision, but it's also a good problem to have, I would say. Yeah. Right? Oh no, my draft picks are working out. This is a nightmare. This is exactly what is supposed to be happening. This is part of the process, and we always get nervous just because we're not part of those conversations. We don't know what's going on. We don't know who is leaning one way or the other during negotiations, whatever. Something will get figured out one way or the other. And if they don't re-sign him, they'll try to find someone to replace him. Yeah. If they do re-sign him, I'm going to be real happy because I really like Greg Rousseau and I love his potential for 2024. As Big Buffy Baby says, I am all in on Greg. Breakout year incoming. I sure hope so.
Yep.
So let's move on to linebacker.
Yeah, let's do linebacker, yeah.
So everything's fine at linebacker because Buffalo Joe is going to save us, and he's going to make Buffalo defense great again. He's going to build a wall around the city of Buffalo. He's going to keep all of the nasty dolphins and other aquatic animals outside of the city. Nobody's going to run through that wall except for Buffalo Joe to put a stranglehold on this division for the Buffaloes. No. So am I about to get No, I did not get disconnected. I did not. Okay, cool. So yeah, it's you got Terrell Bernard, and we both love Terrell Bernard.
Yes.
We're both big fans of Terrell Bernard. I am not sure what to do outside of that because Dorian Williams, right, is on this team. He was a 3rd round pick last year, had some playing time here and there, but wasn't really much to do, right? There wasn't a lot going on with him. He's been fine this preseason. He's an aggressive linebacker who can come downhill, who can attack the run, but he struggles in coverage. Just how it is right now. He struggles in coverage. The unfortunate thing is Joe Andreessen is basically the same thing. Yeah. Like this is what's really unfortunate is that if Joe Andreessen was just this like undersized coverage linebacker, I'd be like, oh, well, great. This is a nice little gift that has been given to them where they have a downhill linebacker that they can play in those situations. And they have another linebacker that they can play in coverage situations. Crazy. But that's not how it is. Joe Andreessen is another very aggressive linebacker who can attack space and can get downhill and be aggressive and make tackles, but struggles in space in coverage, right? Yeah. So I don't really know what to do with that. That makes me concerned. And then on top of that, as just the typical news says, Bail Inspector will probably roll his ankle walking to his car. Yes, it's not great. It's not a great situation at linebacker right now.
Yeah, I mean, here the good thing is we can lean on Terrell Bernard because they did it last year, and somehow Tyrell Dodson became serviceable. So if Tyrell Dodson can become serviceable in this defense next to Terrell Bernard, I'm confident that they can find a serviceable player to be put alongside Terrell Bernard, whether that is Dorian Williams, Nicholas Morrow, Joe Andreessen, or even Bail Inspector. In fact, I just was thinking this. Bail Inspector, there's a chance he is the best option if he's healthy. There's a legitimate chance that it could be Terrell Bernard and Bail Inspector are our best option. I don't know if that's going to happen because, like just the typical who said, that guy seems to be made of glass and can't play ever for the Bills. So then to me, it has to be Dorian Williams. Like, you drafted this guy in the 3rd round. You have to at least throw him out there and give him a shot. And if they don't, that's a huge indictment on him as a player. That doesn't mean his career's over by any means. But if Nicholas Morrow hops him being here for just a short training camp, and Dorian's been here for well over a year at this point, then that's concerning. Eddie Ulofoshio, I don't really see. He's too young. I don't think that the Bills would be confident in him. And then Joe Andreessen is this really, 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 really fun story. But we all just watched that preseason game, and he struggled against the pass. And that touchdown, Eric kind of broke it down on Twitter and was like, yeah, that was on Joe Andreessen. He should have switched. He didn't switch. And that ultimately results in a touchdown. You can't have that in a legitimate NFL game. In preseason, a whole nother story. That being said, I do think that Joe Andreessen's done enough to make this Bills roster. I have him on my 53 at least because he is still very, very, very young. And at a minimum, you know that he can tackle. You know that he can fit the run. You know that he can take on blockers even at his size. You have to coach him up to teach him necessarily where he needs to drop in zone, when to make those switches. And if you do that, there's a real possibility that could be something in a year, in 2 years. But right now, I don't think he's ready to start alongside Terrell Bernard. If he does and is somehow great, it'll be one of the coolest stories we've seen in a long time in football. But for now, I think it's if I had to bet, it's Dorian Williams. And that doesn't particularly excite me. But then again, last year, it didn't really excite a lot of people when Terrell Bernard got announced as a starter. And look what Bernard did. So all of that said, the Bills have Bobby Babich and they have Sean McDermott. I think that they'll be fine with whoever they put at linebacker.
Yeah, I think it'll be fine. It's just disappointing that it's not Matt Milano.
Oh, God damn it.
And I still hate it. I don't like it. I don't like thinking about it. It makes me mad. It makes me sad. It makes me feel a lot of bad feelings and emotions that I wish I didn't have. But yeah, it's tough. It's tough when one of your best players goes down like that, and at a position where they're, not necessarily totally ready to fill the gap that he leaves, right?
Yeah.
It won't be like so bad where it'll be like the whole defense falls apart or whatever, because there's too much talent around the defense as a whole. But yeah, it's just it's a tough situation. If Daquan Jones went down, not that I'm hoping that had happened, right? That's not what I'm trying to say, obviously, but it's him going. If Daquan Jones had gone down, that would have been a little bit easier to replace because of what they did in the offseason. Whereas at linebacker, it's kind of like you have some guys who can do certain things. You're not gonna have a guy that can really try and replicate in any sense what Matt Milano brings to this team. So
and I think that we see kind of a similar approach as last year when Milano went down, where they did the 3 safety looks. I'm assuming our safeties can somehow get healthy, because they're not healthy either, which does quell my concerns a little bit, because like we talked about, Dorian Williams and and Joe Andreessen, they're good run stoppers, but against the pass, there's a lot to be desired with those two. And the scary thing for me is that this is where offenses are going to attack. They're going to attack that linebacker, and they're going to attack those safeties, and they're going to do it over and over and over and over and over until somebody can stop them. And if we run into a situation where a Terrell Bernard went down, for instance, we'd be left with a very similar spot as we were in that Chiefs game, where the Chiefs essentially said, okay, you have AJ Klein and Tyrell Dodson out there. Like, we're just going to continue to throw at those two because you can't do anything to stop us. And the Bills couldn't. And that's the most terrifying. Like, Terrell Bernard needs to stay healthy. He 1 billion% needs to stay healthy until Matt Milano can miraculously recover and come back to this team.
For sure. You brought up safety. Let's talk about safety specifically, because that has been a big topic of discussion, not just throughout this offseason, but particularly during training camp and preseason, because of all the injuries and whatnot. So last Thursday, friend of the show, Max Toscano, DM'd, and just with no preamble, no nothing, just decided to DM me. I can't believe McDermott actually got Cole Bishop. Which is kind of a did I get no, okay, we're good. But it was just a funny random DM to get in the middle of the day, and it was pretty great. And I said, it's such a perfect match. There's some criticism to be had about McDermott as a coach, but he knows defensive backs that I think only Spags and Bowles can really compete with in today's NFL, right? Like, especially now that Bill Belichick and Pete Carroll are gone. Like, those 3 are probably the best guys when talking about people who could coach up defensive backs. And he's like, yeah, I agree with this. It's why it's notable when he gets a player like Bishop, because it's like when someone like Kyle Shanahan gets a actually talented offensive lineman or an actually talented running back, instead of just making Raheem Mostert or some other, 7th round undrafted guy into a Pro Bowl running back. It's true. Like, it does mean something when a team that has historically been kind of lower end investments on this particular position decides this is a guy that we need to have, and we need to spend a premium pick on this guy. And it sucks that he got hurt in training camp and couldn't play in the preseason, because that was something I was really looking forward to watching. That being said, both him and Mike Edwards are on an upward trajectory to be they're at practice, right? Like, they're going through some stuff. it seems like one or the other, maybe both, will be ready by the time the regular season rolls around.
Yeah, and it does make me wonder if one or both is ready. Do they get the start next to Taylor Rapp, or are we in for another guy that's struggling with injuries? Is Damar Hamlin legitimately going to be the starting safety week 1 for the Bills? I wouldn't be surprised by any of those three getting the start next to Taylor Rapp. I really, really want it to be Cole Bishop, but I think that time will be beneficial for Cole Bishop as he starts to build into this defense and understand all of the different, complexities of it. And once he does, and once he's ready to go, and I still expect them to sprinkle him in, he's not going to just be 0 snaps on the bench or game day inactive every single week. I think they sprinkle him in. And once he gets up to full speed where Sean McDermott's okay with starting him, I think we're in for a really, really good player. And then if I have a player like Cole Bishop and the potential that I believe he could hit with a player like Taylor Rapp, who presents a pretty damn good floor, I think that safety duo can be really, 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 really good. And I think they'll get better as the season goes on. So that's one position I think is really exciting for Bills fans, because I think all of us are tuned in enough to see what could happen there. I think from the outside looking in, most of the rest of the NFL is like, well, they don't have Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer. What the hell are they doing? They're going to get destroyed. And it's like, there's something good brewing here. And I think they'll end up surprising a lot of people, assuming that the potential is at least met minorly. If it's completely whiffed on and Cole Bishop is a nothing, then this is not very good for the Bills, but I don't expect that to happen.
Yeah, I think that, and I've kind of been a low-key Taylor Rapp defender since he's been signed and played through this past season. I think that he will end up surprising some people this year, or at least I hope so. Mostly for my sake than anything else, because I feel like I'm one of the only ones who's like, yeah, Taylor Rapp will be good. It'll be fine. And I hope that he is. But I do think that whether it's Hamlin or Bishop or Edwards, whoever does end up starting opposite of Rapp will be fine. At least, right?
Yeah.
Damar Hamlin will be fine. I would prefer Mike Edwards over Hamlin, and I prefer Cole Bishop over both of them, because of the skill set that Cole Bishop brings. But like, any one of those three will be fine. I am totally okay with the Bills safety situation. I know there's a lot of speculation and nervousness because, like you said, they have not had a different pair of safeties since 2017 with this particular regime. We've literally not seen this team under Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane plan for a season without Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde before as the starters. So I get it. I get the nervousness. I get kind of the trepidation with this, particularly from an outsider's perspective. But I do like Taylor Rapp. I think that he's a good fit for this defense. I like Mike Edwards. I think he's a good fit for this defense. And I like Cole Bishop because he brings a very different skill set and an aggression that this team needs on the back end in particular. So I think however this shakes out, things will be fine. It may not be amazing, and it's probably not going to be like 2017 to 2020 run of Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer 2021, whenever, but they'll be good. Yeah. I think that they will be more than fine. Again, going back to kind of what I said to Max, which is there's only a couple guys that I feel totally confident in coaching up defensive backs, and that's McDermott, Bowles, and Spags. That's pretty much it. So I'm okay with that.
And just a little bit, I guess, ray of hope for how good the Bills can do, even if their safety duo isn't playing up to the completely dominant form. The only game I really remember where both Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde didn't play was 2022 Bills Dolphins, the Heat game, right? Where it was Jaquan Johnson and Damar Hamlin, and they held Tua under 200 yards and the Dolphins to 21 points. And they held Tyreek Hill to 33 yards. So if they can do that with Damar Hamlin and Jaquan Johnson, I'm fairly confident they can do something better with Taylor Rapp. And so, like, Taylor Rapp is better than Jaquan Johnson. Let's put it that way. We'll just leave it there.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure we won't get any pushback on that particular idea. Sweet Spike says Bishop will be the Bills' first safety with speed since the drought. I will say, as good as Hyde and Poyer both were, neither of their plus traits, I should say, was speed. So it's not a bad point to make. Mike Edwards also, I feel like, no. I always thought Mike Edwards was fast, and I must have been thinking of someone else, man. Because it's not like he's like abysmally slow or something like that, but I thought he was like a 4.3 type of guy, and he's like a 4.6 or something like that.
Kentucky, 4.5.
4.5. Yeah,
but that was
which is
pro day number too.
Okay, yeah, which is fine. It's a perfectly fine speed for a safety. But Cole Bishop was a 4.45 guy. So we're talking about like actual legitimate speed there, which I'm excited about, and we all should be excited about because when you combine speed with his size, his level of aggression, his intelligence, like, again, there's a reason why this team decided this was the guy they needed to have. That like. It's a very real thing, so I'm excited to see Cole Bishop play for this team.
981 RAS score too, which is
not bad.
I like that. Yeah,
not bad. So let's talk about corners. First of all, let's talk about everyone's favorite corner. As Mina Kimes put, one of the most underrated players in the NFL, and she's 100% correct. And that's Taron Johnson, who continues to be amazing. Was great in that Pittsburgh game. Didn't play in the Panthers game. We can talk about Taron Johnson for probably the rest of the hour, and we would still have more to say. But the fact of the matter is he's an all-pro, and we're going to talk about him a ton during the season. So I don't really feel like talking about him right now, because we're going to talk about him more and more as the season goes on, because that dude is just so freaking good. I love not only did Mina Kimes bring up that he's one of the most underrated players in the NFL, but then the NFL did like a cross post with the Bills on Instagram, just showing Taron Johnson highlights because of her tweet. And I was like, all right, that's pretty cool. I hope more people learn who Taron Johnson is because of something like that.
Yeah. I also am fairly confident he's going to be a captain this year, which is a big deal, I think. So,
good call.
Taron Johnson as a captain, like, is that
something you can bet on?
I'm sure you can if you're in Vegas. You probably can, but it's definitely not on any of my books. But I will say I wear a blue jersey during every single Bills away game. I've been wearing Jordan Poyer for a very, very long time now. I need a new jersey this year. It's Taron Johnson, and I want him to be named the captain in part because of that. I need to order that ASAP because I need it here by the Miami game.
That's fair. I like that. So let's talk about corner. I actually felt like coming into training camp and into the preseason that this was something I was going to focus on much more than I actually did. But the reality is that Christian Benford's going to be starting on one side and Rasul Douglas will be starting on the other. And I feel very confident in saying that. I understand that Kyrie Elam had another good training camp, and I don't think he had a bad preseason either. But I think that Benford is better right now, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong. This is something I would like to very gently explain to all the viewers at home. There's nothing wrong with Christian Benford being better than Kyrie Elam. There's nothing wrong with that. It doesn't mean that Kyrie Elam is bad. It doesn't mean that his career is hopeless. It doesn't even mean his career with the Bills is over. Right now, Kyrie Elam is cornerback number 3 for this team. At some point, Christian Benford or Rasul Douglas will probably get hurt. Corner is a tough position to play. It's tough to play all 17 games of the season. Both Douglas and Benford have some injury history. Nothing like major or long term, right? Like it's usually just something that they get banged up for a little bit, a week or two, somebody has to fill in. Right now, I would say I feel as confident as I can be, realistically speaking, in Kyer Elam, which I don't think I really felt that way last year. I kind of felt like if he's not starting, then I don't really feel all that great about him. I didn't feel like that was going to be, when he was not the starter, I was like, this might not work out, Whereas now I kind of feel like, okay, if he comes in, I think he'll be fine. Having a new set of coaches around him, Babbage being in charge, new deep backs coach, or defensive backs coach, I should say, not the deep backs. Screw the Diamondbacks, garbage ass team. Sorry, I got very bitter because I'm a Phillies fan and they knocked out the Phillies in the NLCS last year. Anyway, but they have a new defensive backs coach who works with more man coverage types, right? And that's definitely what Kyer Elam was, right? And that was also part of the risk with taking Kyer Elam in the first round, was that you took him because of traits. Yeah. You didn't take him because he was a fit. You took Christian Benford to kind of hedge your bets, because Christian Benford hit more of your boxes that you normally check off for this defense. Really good in zone coverage, smart, plays everything in front of him. Like, you knew as soon as he got drafted, and you kind of saw the little blurbs that they had when he got drafted. It was like, oh, so this dude is just like Dane Jackson or Levi Wallace. Except honestly, he's better than both of those guys.
Yeah.
And Levi Wallace was not a bad player. Levi Wallace's biggest problem was just that he was not athletic at all. Right. And he was really technically sound. He just never had the real athleticism necessary to be a strong starting corner. Dane Jackson was a little bit better than Levi Wallace, in my opinion, but ultimately was still limited. Whereas with Christian Benford, I don't feel like the same level of limitation. I feel like he's more closer to like an actual average starting cornerback than both Levi Wallace and Dane Jackson were. And again, I liked both Jackson and Wallace, and I think they both kind of got misfairly represented by the Bills fan base, just because they were often picked on, because of course they're going to be picked on, because usually it's Trey White on the other side of the field. You're not going to throw Trey White a bunch. So you got to just have to throw a bunch to this other guy. He's going to get a lot of tough opportunities, going to get a lot of tough chances, but they would always fight through that. And I think you see that more with Christian Benford. And I think you see more consistency from Christian Benford, which is great. I really like Christian Benford. He's just good.
Yeah. Real quick before I get in my Christian Benford spiel, I did pull up Levi Wallace's Raz card too, and it's one of the funniest ones I've ever seen, just because of his 40-yard dash time, which they break into 3 separate sections. What you're ranked at your 10-yard, what you're ranked at 20, and what you're ranked at 40. At 10-yard, he was ranked at 0.95, which is abysmal. It's a scale between 0 and 10. So if you're below 1, it's awful. At 20, he was 8.6, which is an elite number, meaning he had sped up between 10 and 20 yards to a point where he was now considered elite at the 20-yard mark. But then at the 40-yard mark, he dropped down to 2.5, meaning that his splits make no sense. He essentially sped up and then slowed down. So I don't know what happened. Maybe it's worth going to rewatch that. Maybe he just fell. It's the most wild Raz card I've ever seen to go from awful to elite to awful. Sorry, I had just seen that and I had to tell the world about that. So when it comes to Christian Benford, all your points are spot on. Like, he's a good football player. He's a good football player, and at this point, he's better than Kyer Elam. And it goes back to a thing we've said 100 times. Like, if you switched where Benford and Elam were drafted, like just split those numbers, Benford, no one would care. People would not care that Benford outplayed Elam. People would also be talking about Benford in a very, very different way. He'd probably be getting Pro Bowl nods, to be honest, just because that draft position holds so much weight and power. When it comes to this season, and I just wrote this in my article for the Bills preview, I truly believe that the Bills might have their best corner duo since Stephon Gilmore and Ronald Darby, or possibly even going back to Nate Clements and Antoine Winfield. I think Rasul Douglas and Christian Benford are an incredible duo. I think that they're better than the Trey White, Levi Wallace era. So if I put them there, the next best era is Gilmore and Darby, who were awesome. And there's a chance they might be better than them.
I, first of all, love your dedication to hot taking like the last 20 years of Bills cornerback duos. And you know what? You might be onto something. Because like as Walter S brings up here, this an interesting point to bring up. So Benford may be more of a technically sound option, but okay, I'm gonna assume you mean Elam here. But Elam is a better playmaker, in my opinion. On a team that lacks defensive playmakers in the postseason, Elam has his value. Okay. But Rasul Douglas is a playmaker. Like, that was his whole thing when he got traded for last year. He made so many plays last year. And, like, yeah, he didn't do anything in that Kansas City game because he was so hurt. And it was so obvious that he was hurt, right? Like, it was so freaking obvious that he should not have been out there. They were just trying desperately to not be so depleted on defense that they would, lose control of that game completely.
Because Benford didn't play, because Benford was hurt too.
Right. That's the thing. Like this is what I mean. So this is what's great, right? Is you have on one side a genuine playmaker who fits really well in this defense in Rasul Douglas, and on the other side you have who Douglas can make plays, can be aggressive on the ball, will go and make big plays when he gets an opportunity to. And Benford is just steady Eddie, will be in position, will make tackles, will try to make as many pass breakups as possible, make as many contested catch situations as possible. That's what you want. You can't like, would it be exciting to have like a Trayvon Diggs, Deron Bland type of duo? Sure. Until you have to go through 17 games of seeing those two play and seeing what they give up in between their interceptions. Like, there's something to be said about just being someone who is in position and doing what you need to do, doing your 111th, as Aaron Quinn often says. Like, you have to have guys that do that. And the fact that they kind of have a bit of both, in terms of they have one guy who can do it one way and another guy who can do it another way. That works to me. That to me seems more like the Sean McDermott type of defense, right? Going back to those Trey White days, right? God, it pains me that I just said back in the Trey White days. Good Lord. Ugh. It's like a knife to the heart. All right, I'm going to have to push through that. All right. Back in the Trey White days, Trey White was sort of the playmaking cornerback. He wasn't quite the like risk taker necessarily that a Deron Bland, Trayvon Diggs, or even a Rasul Douglas to an extent, right? He's not even that kind of guy. Trey White was just kind of a perfect corner for this defense because he was super smart and played his assignment, but also knew when to attack and be aggressive and do all those sorts of things. But on the opposite side, they just had someone that they kind of funneled a lot of the opposing passing game through because they knew they could just have somebody that would be in position and, maybe not more often than not, it would be a plus for them, but it was often enough. It was often enough where they did not feel like that cornerback 2 was a liability, right? We weren't talking about like Philip Gaines in 2018, who was a mess and got benched like real quickly for Vontae Davis, who then was like, peace, I'm out, not doing this anymore. Which, another strange memory. What a weird ass team this team is. Like, I know that there's probably weird stories that every NFL franchise has to some degree or another. Having a guy just leave in the middle of a game and not even make a big show of it either. He left in the locker room. It was halftime. He was just like, no, I'm not coming back out. I'm not doing it. It's not even like Antonio Brown leaving, throwing his pads off, making a big dramatic scene of himself. Like, it wasn't that. He was just like, no, I'm out. I'm done. I'm not doing this anymore. I'm good.
Yeah, wild, absolutely wild.
But yeah, overall, cornerback room, the starting two, I feel really good about, and I feel like they're a little underrated at this point, and I am hoping they will prove everyone wrong, and that they will be a really good start. Honestly, I hope this whole defense, particularly the back seven, right? There's a lot of doubts on the Bills defense because of how the back seven is right now. Some of that does have to do with the Milano injury, which is a legitimate concern, a very fair and real concern to have. It's one that I share. But there's also just, like we talked about, concerns about safety and how good is Christian Benford? Shouldn't they have tried to upgrade there? And it's like, no, not really. That's when you're talking about like how they should be spreading their resources out. No, like that's not a position where they should have put another high draft pick in or another free agent signing into. They did exactly what they needed to do because the guys that they have there right now are good. Period.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. Like, and I always go back to, I think the biggest take that where the national media is missing on the Bills completely is this idea that this secondary is terrible now, and it's all built on this idea of, well, they don't have Trey White, Micah Hyde, and Jordan Poyer, without the realization that essentially we haven't had Trey White, Jordan Hyde, and Micah Poyer for 2 years now, or almost 3 years to some extent, and there's a possibility, and it is by no means a guarantee, that this secondary could be better this season than it was last season. I don't think that's as wild as it seems, because I do think that this corner duo is really, really good. And I think that this safety duo or trio or quadro or whatever the hell it's going to end up being could end up being a sneaky surprise that has a better season this year than, say, Poyer and Hyde had last year. That's not saying that they're better than Poyer and Hyde. That's just saying towards the end of Poyer and Hyde's tenure with the Bills, there was some regression, and this unit could see a progression. So I'm really, really, really excited for this. But like I said, with the linebacker position, where teams are going to test that over and over and over again, the other spot they're going to test is safety, because it's unproven right now. We have all this potential and these ideas and these hopes with them, but until we kind of prove that, there's no real guarantee there. And I expect the Cardinals to be the first team of many that try to test it, because Kyler Murray's got a decent deep ball and Marvin Harrison's going to be running and right underneath Taylor Rapp and Cole Bishop and Mike Edwards. And that'll be a really good test to start the season with.
For sure. Music Blocker 87 asks, if we did a redraft, in what round would Benford go in now?
Oh,
I mean,
man.
The third, at least, right?
I don't. That's a really, really good question. I don't have an answer off the top of my head.
I feel like third is pretty reasonable for him. I feel like a team would feel pretty good about drafting Christian Benford in the third round.
If we just purely going off of feels, like without doing like any analysis at all, because there's no way we can do that right now. Yeah, I think third is a solid number for him. Third, late second, third sounds better. Top 64 is a little bit tight, but third is a pretty good number. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel pretty good about saying that. Just sort of not knowing what the rest of that draft was like off the top of my head, but yeah, I don't know. It just third round seems pretty appropriate, and for someone who was a 6th round pick, that's a nice thing to be able to say. Walter S says, even now, I'm not concerned about the back half because we've seen we can play well still without Milano. My concerns remain with, in my opinion, a worse defensive line, too much if/hope, and not enough proven track record. Before I get to that, you were going to say something.
No, I'm looking at the corners drafted. Like, I'm going to rip off second and third rounders really quick. Roger McCreary, Kyler Gordon, Andrew Booth, Cam Taylor-Britt, Martin Emerson, Cordell Flott, and Marcus Jones. I think out of those, Cam Taylor-Britt
Taylor-Britt is good. Kyler Gordon, there's been a lot of Kyler Gordon hype coming out of Bears training camp, which is he was somebody that a lot of people liked coming out. It was like him and Trent McDuffie were in that same class, right?
Do I have the wrong?
They're both.
Where's Christian Benford on here? Oh, I don't even. Is this the wrong?
Is this the wrong?
No, this is the right one, because I see. Oh, they list him as a DB. Okay. I was
Oh,
like,
that's
why are they
dumb.
not listening? Stupid.
That's stupid.
Anyway.
But yeah, like Cam Taylor-Britt, Kyler Gordon. There was another name in there.
Roger McCreary has 132 tackles.
I liked Roger McCreary coming out. I don't think he's really done much in the NFL. He's one of those Titans corners that they've drafted, like one of like 70 of the last 5 years that they've drafted. And it's like, hey, maybe this is gonna be the guy. And it's just like, no, probably not. Yeah.
So third round, probably, yeah. Early third, somewhere around there. Early to mid.
I feel pretty confident in saying that. Yeah, I mean, to address Walter S.'s comment, not concerned about the back half, more concerned about the defensive line, which he feels is worse. We talked about this earlier when we talked about the defensive line. I feel like this, I think, I can't remember who, maybe it was Aaron. I think it was Aaron Quinn of the Cover One flagship show on Wednesday nights. He said that he felt like this was the strongest defensive line that McDermott has had. And I'm kind of inclined to agree with that. Like this just feels like they are too deep at each spot with players that can actually contribute and play. Even if you don't feel great about like DeJuan Smoot and AJ Epinesa as like juice pass rushers necessarily, you still have like Javon Solomon, who has enough speed and bend around the edge that he can just be this weird pass rush specialist. I feel fine. I feel totally fine with that. I'm totally fine with this defensive line. I really like this defensive line. I feel inclined to agree with Aaron Quinn that this is probably the best rotation of defensive linemen that McDermott has had in his career with the Bills.
Yeah, the only major loss essentially is Leonard Floyd, who had 10.5 sacks last year. But I just had to pull up the number because this is at least was my feeling, and my feeling is backed by the numbers. In the first 11 games, Leonard Floyd had 9.5 sacks. In the final 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 games, including the 2 in the playoffs, in the final 8 games, he had 1. So he fell off a cliff at the end of the year. Yep. The beginning was really, really fun. I don't expect that to happen to a younger player like AJ Epinesa or, Greg Rousseau, assuming health. But Epinesa, I believe, had 6.5 sacks last year. So he was 4 behind Leonard Floyd while playing probably half the snaps. So there's an argument to be made that Epinesa isn't a big downgrade to Leonard Floyd, considering what the final part of Leonard Floyd's season looked like. And now we have what I believe are better backups. So, yeah, I don't think it's crazy to say that this could be the best defensive line the Bills have had in McDermott era. I don't think that's crazy at all.
Fair enough. We should talk about special teams. More specifically, I'm going to let you talk about special teams. Let's talk about Tyler Bass. Let's get this out of the way right now. So, a lot has been made about Tyler Bass throughout this offseason. Obviously missed the kick against the Chiefs, which basically ended the game and ended the Bills season. The reports out of training camp have not been consistent. Well, no, actually, I should say the reports have been consistent in that he's been inconsistent. And that's what's unfortunate. He's missing from distance, it seems like, more than anything else. He's been a little inconsistent, even not from long distances. In the preseason, he's been making his kicks, but a lot of them have been real short kicks.
Yeah.
He made a 49-yarder in the first game, if I remember correctly, which was good to see, but it was also not that far off from being a missed kick either. He misses a 51-yarder against the Panthers, which was disappointing. I don't know what you do with Tyler. I mean, I know what you do with Tyler Bass. You keep Tyler Bass because you don't really have any other options right now. I don't love it. And it seems, just sort of going off of historical precedent, once your kicker kind of loses it, they don't tend to get it back, whatever it is.
Yeah, that's where a 51-yarder is not an easy field goal. So he missed that in the preseason game. Not an easy field goal, but the bigger concern is you knew it right away. It wasn't like as soon as he kicked it, you knew it wasn't going in. And they panned to him for a second, and he looked a little dejected. I think if he hits that, he goes into the season with some momentum, and that would have been great. But that's not what happened. And now I don't know what to think. And my biggest concern for him from a mental standpoint is that if I go look at the playoff games where that's the biggest crunch time game, like, right, that's all the pressure's on you in the playoffs. If you miss in the regular season, so what? You miss in the regular season, whether it's a game-winning kick or game-tying kick, it sucks, but you live to fight another day. You miss in the playoffs, you start to struggle a little bit more, and that can really mess with you mentally. And the wildest thing to me is that in the playoffs, outside of 50, he's 100%. He's 3 for 3. Inside of 50, he's 9 for 14. That's horrendous. That's absolutely terrible. And that's concerning to me because it kind of shows, maybe I'm looking for this on purpose, but it kind of shows that in those big moments, in those pressure-packed situations, he struggles. And now every single moment is going to be pressure-packed for him because his mind, I don't think, is right. And like you said, David, like if once a kicker loses it, it's almost impossible for them to get it back. Like the only way I think I start to feel some level of confidence with him, he could miss a kick or two, and I don't think it's really going to change my current opinion of him. But if he drills an early season game winner from, say, 50 yards, which I would not even watch the TV when it happened, but if he does drill it, I think you're going to see him flip the script, and suddenly he'll be really good again until the playoffs. And that's the concerning part for me. The problem is they can't really do anything because his contract doesn't really allow them to right now. I guess in theory, if he's an absolute disaster and like he can't do anything, like he's missing extra points and field goals right away, they'll have no choice. They'll have to cut him and bring someone else in. It sucks. It absolutely sucks because early in Tyler Bass's career, we saw oodles and oodles and oodles of talent. And now we're seeing the downfall of a player who, by all accounts, seems like a really good person. By all accounts, seems to have all the talent in the world. But he missed that kick against Kansas City. He struggled in the playoffs historically, and now he seems to struggle. He seems to be struggling coming back from that. I don't know what we're going to see. I wouldn't write him off completely just yet. That being said, we're getting closer and closer to this being maybe the biggest problem on the Bills roster, which is ridiculous.
Yeah, and it's tough because, I mean, when he got drafted and he had a really good rookie season, I mean, he had a rough start. It really wasn't as bad as people kind of made it out to be.
Because he made that kick that they said he missed in the first game.
Well, I was part of it, right? It's like I remember thinking, like, okay, I know it says he missed a couple field goals, but like he really made one of those that he missed, and whatever. But he struggled a little bit in that rookie season, but especially down the stretch, he was great. And then the next couple seasons, he was great. And it's just at some point, I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's a confidence thing. I don't know if it's a mechanical thing. Maybe it's one affecting the other. I don't know. But whatever it is, it has been lost. And you can theoretically find it again, right? Like there's been baseball players who get the yips, right? Mm-hmm. Pitchers who can't locate their pitches, who can't generate the velocity that they need. But it's hard. It's hard to figure out how to get back to that level again. And at the very least, even if he is not able to be the Pro Bowl like where I feel overly confident in him as a kicker who can make from any distance at any given point in time, at the very least, he can't be a guy where when you're within 40 yards, you're like, I don't know. It's a toss-up. It's like, you have to be able to at least make the kicks that are easy within 40 yards. If you can't do that, then that's a big problem. That's when things really start to get dicey.
Yeah, I would like one, to some extent, benefit of the doubt that I do give him is like, it's really, really, this is kind of an excuse, but not an excuse for the struggles we've seen as of late. It's really hard to kick in Buffalo. Like, of all the stadiums in the NFL, it very well might be the hardest to, just because the wind's such a ridiculous thing there. And also, they play in the AFC East where you play outdoors when it's really, really cold. And Tyler Bass needs to be better in those situations. But that being said, his misses last year, I just pulled up his misses, were in Buffalo, New England, Philly when it was pouring rain out, and then in the playoffs against Pittsburgh and Kansas and Kansas City in Buffalo. So we're talking about not great weather situations. Nonetheless, we also saw the Eagles kicker drill a 60-yarder to send him in overtime in the same exact weather. I just, that's one kind of, I guess, ray of hope for me here is that, like, if the weather's nice, he kind of makes the kicks. But the problem is in Buffalo, the weather's rarely nice when it matters most. So it'll be a concern until it's not a concern, which is either going to be when Bass isn't on the team or when he starts drilling kicks consistently again.
Yeah. Sam Martin has been fine
in
preseason, which I guess is better than my expectation of him. I think there's been some lapses in special teams coverage overall, which I'm more willing to ascribe to injuries and just the amount of injuries that they've had. And I think we talked about this last week where, like, injuries obviously affect your starting lineup on offense and defense, but they also really affect your special teams as well, because then the next guy up there is somebody who just has not had those sorts of reps, doesn't have the same amount of practice. It's just tough. It is really tough. So I think that the injuries hopefully will be able to recover to a point where they'll be fine. I don't know how fine, but they don't need to be like amazing. They don't need to be like a top 10 special teams unit or anything. They just cannot be a liability at this point. So, all right. We have gone for almost 2 hours, and part of that was me hoping that some sort of news was going to break while we were on the air, but I don't think it's going to happen. So
it's not.
We are going to end our show here, folks. Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate all of you. We will see you all next week when this roster has been finalized. To that point, there's always going to be changes here and there, but we are going to be with you tomorrow. Just, we'll be on Twitter. We'll probably have some takes on who has been put on the roster, who has been taken off the roster, who is released, who's on the practice squad, all that good stuff. We'll be there to work through all that, and we're happy that the regular season is fast approaching now. Even though we still have a whole week off until we really get into things, it's exciting that we are getting so close to this. Uber, where can the people find you?
At UberHansen on Twitter. I have been quite drunk as of late on Twitter, so that's always either a good time. Well, it's a good time for me, so I hope it's a good time for everybody else. But I also have been writing for si.com/NFL/Bills. I finished my AFC East preview, and now that we're getting to the Cardinals game, I won't have an article this week, but next week I'll have a preview of the Cardinals game. I'm very excited for that one.
You can find me at DFAUXY or at DFoxy. I also write for si.com. I'll be writing recaps after each game. I'll be doing other articles kind of just throughout when I actually have something that I want to write about. It's a good time. We are both looking forward to this season. We're both looking forward to just having football in our lives again, real football in our lives. So until we see you all next week, we are hoping for a very smooth and hopefully not confusing final roster cut down day tomorrow. We will see you all next week and discuss everything then.